Welcome to the Healthy Heart Nation Heart to Heart podcast, where we connect, educate, and empower our communities to live healthier, longer lives. Today, we are kicking off Hypertension Awareness Month by talking about something that affects millions: high blood pressure. It's responsible for over 10 million deaths every single year worldwide. But here's the powerful truth: it is one of the most preventable conditions. And when we take control of it, we can prevent heart failure, kidney failure, and strokes. This mission is deeply personal to me. I watched my father lose his kidney functions in his early 30s because of uncontrolled high blood pressure, and ultimately, he lost his life. That pain became part of my purpose. That's why, since 2023, Healthy Heart Nation has been on a mission through our Pressure Project to meet people where they are in churches, barbershops, and trusted community spaces. To date, we have delivered over 5,000 blood pressure screenings and education monthly in 6 states and in 21 locations. Why? Because we believe awareness leads to action, and action saves lives. And today, you are in for a treat. I am honored to be joined by world-renowned interventional cardiologist, Dr. Columbus Batiste. Hi, Columbus.
Hey there. How you doing?
I'm sorry. Is it okay if I call you Columbus?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, I'm going to just do that anyway because it's a little shorter. But for everyone else, Dr. Columbus Batiste is an interventional cardiologist. He has embraced the power of a positive lifestyle and is going to break down why controlling blood pressure isn't just important, it's life-saving, and what each of us can start doing right now to protect our hearts. So stay with us, lean in, and let's take this journey together, because your life, your health, and your future matter. So high blood pressure is called the silent killer, but today we're breaking the silence. Because what you don't know can hurt you, and what you do know can save your life. So, Columbus, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate that.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Always nice to speak with you.
Okay, so let's start with the big picture. Why is blood pressure often called the silent killer, and why should people take it more seriously, even if they feel fine?
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, when it comes to high blood pressure, I always, we love movies, right? So we love movies. And, you always think, and I reflect on a movie. Now, you all may think I'm a little violent, right? It's not me, it's my loved ones, but John Wick. And so when John Wick is walking down the street and they're doing the countdown or whatever else, and he has to look out for all of the dangers that are surrounding him. Now, if he walks around and he is not paying attention to the dangers that are surrounding him, he can be killed and taken out. And so one of the things that we know with high blood pressure is that it is indeed silent. It's like a ninja. It's hiding. It doesn't elicit any symptoms whatsoever. And so people will oftentimes say, well, doc, I have headaches. My nose started bleeding, or I felt dizzy, or I felt lightheaded, or I know my pressure was up. Unfortunately, we know that the symptoms don't always correlate with the blood pressure. But if you have extremely high blood pressure during that time, we know it can be extremely impactful. So while the blood pressure is high, and so what becomes important first to understand is when we talk about blood pressure, you have to think of your artery as a cylinder, right? And some may describe it as a pipe. And so the pressure exerted against that pipe or that water hose it's increased. Think of it like a garden hose. You turn the nozzle up, and then now all of a sudden the pressure of the water coming out is at a higher velocity. And so you might use a different level of pressure to water your roses than you do for the lawn, than you do to spray down your driveway. But imagine if you have a fireman's hydrant hose and you take that to your lawn or you take it to your roses, what's going to happen? It's going to be destroyed. And so we know that the same thing begins to happen when a person is exposed to high blood pressure on a repeated daily basis, but yet they don't know the symptoms. Now the lining of the vessels becomes disrupted. Now the organs become disrupted. And now you continue to build more and more issues related to this elevated pressure.
Okay, so you had me at John Wick. Okay, let's just go ahead and let's just go ahead and put that out there. Okay, but so a lot of so as it relates to high blood pressure, thank you so much for explaining how it works. But essentially, right, the pressure is based on the way that the blood flows from the heart and to the heart. Is that correct? And
Yeah,
that blood feeds the organs.
that's great. That's great. So we what we call it is that when we say our blood pressure, it is a component of our what we call cardiac output and also our resistance, total vascular resistance. So what that means is imagine if I'm squeezing, the heart's just a pump that squeezes out. So you're correct in that the volume of blood that will play a role in how much is squeezed out. So we call that the volume or the stroke volume. And then you're looking at the speed at which the heart will contract. That's the heart rate. So the heart rate times the stroke volume is the cardiac output. And when you look at that plus what's called the resistance, think of it like trying to blow up a small, tiny balloon versus blowing up one of the larger balloons. It doesn't require the same level of pressure exerted. There's higher pressure or force that's there. So when we look at those together, that is what high blood pressure is. So we measure it with the top number, which means the force it takes the heart to push open the door to eject the blood to the entirety of the body versus the force of against that the door is closing against. And that becomes important because what we know is that each of them equally plays a role in adverse events.
Okay, so when your blood pressure is not normal, and we consider normal less than 120 over 80, that essentially means that your heart has to work harder. So therefore, you're putting more pressure on your heart over time.
That's good. Well, I'm going to take a step back from that because when we look at characterizing blood pressure, and a lot of times people are saying, they'll say to me, Doc, what does that mean? Or they may not even ask me what it means, but they'll look at me with a blank stare on their face. And so when we assess the categories of high blood pressure, which you're correct, we characterize it as normal, elevated, we will characterize it as stage 1 and stage 2, and then hypertensive, either urgency or crises. And so when each of those stages is really about saying, is there a higher level of risk? At each stage, there's an increased risk. And the increased risk of what? Well, an increased risk of your heart becoming too thick and now becoming weak. An increased risk of your kidneys not working well. An increased risk of stroke. That's what we're trying to mitigate are the risk levels. And we're trying to lower that risk. I always tell patients one of the things that's important is, are you leaving your windows and your doors open to your home? And they'll say, no, I'm not leaving. So does it make sense that I'm going to lock my doors but leave the windows open? Or I'm going to leave one open? No, you want to lower the risk as maximally as possible. That decreases the chance of someone stealing what's valuable to you. And that's the same way I feel about a person's life. We want to lower and mitigate the risk of someone stealing your health and your wellness. And so when you're below 120 over 80, we understand that the risk is the lowest below 120 over 80. We know that when it's elevated, there is a slightly elevated risk. That when you're stage 1, and that means that now my blood pressure is greater than 130 over greater than 85, and I'm looking in this range here. Now, most people are saying, well, Doc, I was rushing. I was stressed out. Someone cut me off on traffic. I got into an argument with a family member. Let's recheck it. But rechecking never comes. So what studies have shown is that when you're in your early to midlife, in your 30s to 40s, 50s, stage 1 hypertension increases one's risk of major adverse events significantly. And so our goal is to, as much as possible, is to inform, to educate, and apply therapy, whether that's lifestyle or medicinal, to lower that risk burden as much as possible.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. And so thank you for that explanation. So once again, so if we're talking about normal is less than 120 over 80, and the heart, and so the person's blood pressure is elevated or stage 1, stage 2, or hypertensive crisis, and those numbers are higher than 120 over 80, that means, is that the rate that the heart has to work to pump the blood out?
So
Or
it's
is
not
that overly simplifying?
well, it's not necessarily the rate. So the higher the pressure means the
Mhm.
harder the heart has to work. And so
Okay.
the easiest way to think of it is that if anyone has gone to a gym or you watch someone, you think of Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the day, or any of these folks, and they're bench pressing, right? And they're putting more and more weight on that bar. That means
Okay.
that heavier and heavier. That's as your blood pressure is going up higher and higher. Now, it doesn't matter how, so what ends up happening is you get muscles, like how you look at me and you see the big muscles, same sort of thing like that.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
so what ends up happening is more and more the weights get heavier, your muscles get bigger, and you think, well, that's
Okay.
good. I want my
Right.
heart muscle to get thick, and because the heart is trying to adapt, it's trying to accommodate. But what happens
Okay.
is, think of like a big bodybuilder. They're stiff.
Mhm.
They don't, if you say, are they, they're stiff. They're not going to be fluid in motion. That's what happens to the heart muscle. It becomes stiff. So the pressure rises quickly, and a person can still have a form of heart failure called diastolic heart failure. So
Okay.
getting sick is not necessarily good, but these are all accommodations. Your heart will make adjustments. And we call this like the allostatic load will increase exponentially as you're encountering this high blood pressure silently. And now,
Mhm.
so over a period of time, what eventually happens, even the biggest, strongest person, think of me, right? Think of me.
Right, right.
I'm
That's
bench
what I was
pressing.
thinking about.
I know
I
you
was
were.
I
I know
was
you were. You're thinking
picturing
about me,
yeah.
right? Not The Rock,
Right,
not
right.
anyone else.
Mhm,
You think of me.
mhm,
I'm bench
mhm.
pressing. Eventually, over time, even me and all my muscles, I'm gonna fail. And that's
Oh,
the same thing that we see with the heart muscle. Eventually, the heart
okay.
muscle will get thick, it will adapt,
Mhm.
and then it will fail. And that's
Okay.
what we want to try and prevent, because that occurrence, it happens without you being aware.
All right. So that explains the silent part, right? And so, I think you very adequately explained what happens to the heart. So a lot of times people don't necessarily think about high blood pressure and the kidneys. And so, as I mentioned in my opening, the uncontrolled high blood pressure took my father's kidneys in his early 30s. And it felt like, no warning for us, and all of a sudden he had a life of dialysis for over 40 years before he ended up passing away.
Yeah.
So how does uncontrolled high blood pressure affect the kidneys?
Well, very similarly, what's happening is every organ requires blood flow in and out of it. And so, as I'm increasing that blood flow into the kidneys, and the kidneys play an intricate role in blood pressure control, and they play a
Okay.
role in the regulating. And so, as the regulation gets thrown off, and the kidneys are damaged from the high blood pressure, that results in spilling of protein. Is one of the very first features that we see. And if
Okay.
it goes, again, unabated, no one is able to check it or track it. That continues, and the damage persists until the kidneys are no longer functional. And so that's one of
Okay.
the biggest causes and drivers for kidney failure. Now, here's the thing: is that there are groups. We know that there is a genetic predisposition of an APOL1 gene that can disproportionately increase your risk of kidney failure in when you're
Okay.
hyper. And so that has been
Okay.
shown in relationship with the SARS-CoV virus and the
Mm.
acceleration of this damage. And so it becomes extremely important that we check urine protein, right? So
Mm.
if you are
Mhm.
hypertensive, if you've been told that
Okay.
you have high blood pressure, one of the things your doctor should have checked is, are there any instances in which you're spilling protein? We use the word spilling protein. Think of it like old school, they used to have something called cheesecloth, right? And cheesecloth was something that they would use to strain certain things. And
Oh,
you would put it
okay.
over like a mason jar, you might strain tea
Mhm.
and so forth. The more of the tea leaves you see inside of that cup, it tells you that it's ineffective as a strainer, and as a
Okay.
filter rather. And so when we
Okay.
see that there are now increased levels of protein, micro levels of protein, it tells us the damage is occurring inside the kidneys.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Okay. And so that's the uncontrolled high blood pressure, the undetected high blood pressure. But you mentioned this lipo A is that genetic? Is it passed down
Yes.
through genetics?
So
Okay.
apolipoprotein L1.
Okay. Okay. And it is passed down genetically. So it's a
Yes. So you
trait that you get from someone in your family, and then you're born with this predisposition to kidney failure and other high health risks.
It's predominantly kidney failure. And so one of the things that we know it's not the sole factor, sole determinant, because when the
Okay.
studies were done, there was not 100% progression towards kidney failure if you have that genetic marker. So we know
Okay.
lifestyle plays a huge role and can offset this.
All right. All right. Great. So we've talked about the heart, we've talked about the kidney, and what about the brain? How does blood pressure increase the risk of stroke or even impact memory and cognitive function?
Yeah. So when it comes to the brain, you have a blood-brain barrier that typically will help control the amount of flow, but when the pressure rises like anything else, it can overcome that. And so you might
Okay.
have leakage in the vessels and small vessel disease. You can think of it like the ones that are going to be at greatest risk of having being compromised are going to be the smaller vessels, the smaller branches. And so those can become dysfunctional first and actually can even burst. Now, it may be such a small area that you don't perceive a massive stroke, but now this accumulates over time. And you have what ends up happening is you have impairment of portions of the brain that leads to what we call vascular dementia. And that can be a
Okay.
major issue. So you have that. You can have instances where a person may have a major bleed that happens suddenly for
Hmm.
uncontrolled high blood pressure. Now, one of the biggest myths out there that I've seen circulating inside the internet and on social media is the fact that when you are of advanced age, it no longer becomes important to ensure that your blood pressure is controlled. That is false. So we do know that there are increased risk in terms of a person falling and other aspects
Mhm.
that can happen or feeling lightheaded when they stand up. And that's where personalized approach takes precedent with your provider. But we know that it's important to lower that risk still. And so I know of individuals who've been of advanced age who have their blood pressure has been extremely high that resulted in a major bleed that resulted in their death and demise. And so it becomes so imperative that at all stages of life that we pay attention to what's going on. We pay attention to our numbers. We pay attention. We don't say, well, I'm older, I don't have to worry about it. Or I'm so young, I don't have to worry about it. At
Okay.
each phase of life, it still matters.
Okay, so we talked about the high blood pressure, we talked about the normal pressure. And let's just say that someone is out of control with their blood pressure. Their blood pressure is not under control. Does their hypertension, in terms of whether it impacts their heart, their kidney, or their brain, is that also genetically predisposed? Does that make sense?
I understand. Yes, you're asking, is there a genetic predisposition to which organ will become most affected if they're hypertensive?
Correct.
I'm not aware
Yes.
of that. I'm not aware of that data from an evidence-based
Okay.
perspective at all. I think
Okay.
one has to presume now. A lot of times, what happens is that high blood pressure doesn't just travel by itself. It comes along with a bunch
Okay.
of other stuff. It's coming with
Okay.
diabetes. It's coming with high cholesterol. It's coming with heart disease. It's traveling in a pack, in a gang, right? A crew. And so what we have to do is we have to figure out what all are the contributors to this. And I'll tell you what the
Okay.
common thread a lot of times between all of these is going to be stress. Stress plays a
Okay.
major factor in terms of disease development, as well as in our behavioral response to stress that then further exacerbates or pours gasoline on the and creates this fire of explosion.
Okay. So the stress is always a huge factor as it comes to anything health related, essentially mental and physical, right? So
Correct.
many people feel like high blood pressure is inevitable or uncontrollable. And so, what would you say to someone to challenge that belief?
Well, evidence tells us that that's not the case. When we go inside of some countries, we look inside West Africa, historical studies have shown that individuals who have a blood pressure that is rivals that of someone in their 20s and 30s, that one is not necessarily destined to develop high
Okay.
blood. This is an
Okay.
effect of society oftentimes. It
Mhm.
can be an effect of our lifestyle. And there are so many
Mhm.
multiple factors that play a role with the development of high blood pressure. So when we look at arterial stiffening. And one can think of it like a garden hose, even though I told you not to use the analogy for that. When that garden hose is soft and it's pliable, that means that as the pressure rises, it won't rise exponentially if there's give in that garden hose. If that
So it
garden
has
hose
flexibility.
Yes, if that garden hose now is a pipe and it's inflexible, that pressure
Mhm.
rises exponentially. And so as the arteries stiffen with atherosclerosis or hardening of the vessels, with calcification, now those vessels become rigid. And that's what we call systolic hypertension of the elderly. And so we know
Okay.
that if we're able to keep our vasculature pliable and not
Mhm.
have it become stiffened, not have it become calcified due to inflammation, cholesterol, diabetes, we have a greater
Mhm.
chance of controlling and preventing that from happening. And studies have
Okay.
shown that there are some instances where individuals can reverse or recede it just enough that gives it more give, and it's able to
Okay.
improve, result in blood pressure going down.
All right. So then, from your experience, what are the most effective and realistic steps people can take to control their blood pressure if they're looking at starting today?
Hmm. I think the most important step that person can take is gathering knowledge. Now, you
Okay.
can do that by going to Healthy Heart Nation and downloading some information. You can do
Right.
that by going in and following Healthy Heart Nation online. But other
Okay.
ways that you can do it is go and make sure that you have your blood pressure checked on a regular basis.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
talk with your provider whether or not there are avenues within your insurance for you to get a free blood pressure machine. If you can't
Yes.
get a free blood pressure machine, oftentimes they have it at major supermarkets and stores. They will have it in the pharmacy department, a blood pressure cup that you're able to go in and check. So that knowledge of where you fall becomes extremely important. Now, once you do
Okay.
that, the next step is to go ahead and figure out, okay, let me examine my life and what can have the greatest impact on me. Because one of the class one
Mhm.
indication when a person has high blood pressure is prescribed lifestyle, that
Okay.
making lifestyle adjustments. But what does that mean? What does that mean to you when if I were to tell you, oh, I'm gonna prescribe you with lifestyle? What does that mean? What would you expect the doctor to speak to you about?
Stress,
Okay.
I would expect because I live with the doctor, I kind of know this answer a little bit, but what we eat, moving
Mhm.
our body, exercise and activity,
Okay.
hydration, making sure that you
Okay.
stay hydrated, breathing techniques, so making sure that you take the time to be aware of your body and your breath and also laughing. So
Mhm.
humor is funny, and and maybe John Wick might not be the movie you watch for the humor, maybe, but those kind of things are finding getting joy and pleasure out of moments in your life can help lower your blood pressure. Did I get that right?
I love it. I love it. There are no right or wrong. There's no wrong answers, but those are wonderful explanations and insight. And I mean, I'll dig into one to kind of start off. So I think one of the most important things is our food, right? And what we choose to put into our body. So everyone is
Okay.
aware of the impact of salt and sodium in terms of raising the blood pressure potentially. That's not the sole factor.
Okay.
We also know that it can be a process from sugar sweetened beverages that then makes you more sensitive to the salt. So as you're consuming the sugar sweetened beverages, there's a pathway that exists that makes your body more responsive to the salt and raises your blood pressure. So that becomes important. We know the impact of
So hold on,
all
you're saying sugar affects blood pressure just as
it
much as salt?
does. It can
Wow.
affect
Okay.
blood pressure, absolutely. And so this is one of the most important aspects that's there because this whole confluence, what's called metabolic syndrome, is an issue in which your body is not able to metabolize your blood sugar and the carbohydrates and from those simple carbohydrates from sugar, especially the high
Okay.
fructose corn syrup, from the fructose, even from fruit juices, and what this plays a role in terms of the exacerbation of blood pressure as well as bringing on diabetes. So that's becomes extremely
Okay.
important when a person's looking at it, not just looking solely at the salt, but salt plays a
Okay.
major role because what salt does is it impairs the lining of the vessels, which prevents it
Mm.
from dilating. It impacts multiple avenues of what it plays a role. Now, it doesn't mean you have to go completely salt free, but I'll tell you the easiest, simple solution: quit eating out of a can in a box or a place where if you can eat and you swipe your card, they put a greasy bag in between your legs and you driving the car and eating, I guarantee you that's going to have all the sodium you could ever not want to have right there. And so that's one aspect. So when we look at these things,
Okay.
looking on the positive aspect, here's one of the things that I
Hmm.
like to tell people about. If you can commit to consuming things like, what you drink, hibiscus tree,
Hmm.
tea, that's a
Hmm.
wonderful, wonderful. Now, hibiscus is a flower, and I will tell you that it
Okay.
has a mechanism of action that's very similar to medications. It's essentially four pills in one. It has what's called
Okay.
the calcium channel blocker. So your arteries
Hmm.
actually have three layers. They have the inner layer called the intima. It has a middle layer that is comprised of muscle, and it has an outer layer called the adventitia that has more fat. That inner layer is muscle, and so it's a smooth muscle that reacts to calcium influx. And that calcium influx causes the vessel to constrict. So when you
Okay.
drink hibiscus tea, it blocks that calcium channel. So in that way, the vessel relaxes. But it doesn't stop there.
Okay.
It also has what's called an angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor. These are all medications that people are prescribed. And so that
Hmm.
blocks the formation of what's called angiotensin 2, which now causes the vessel to relax because angiotensin
Okay.
2 causes the vessel to constrict. It doesn't stop
Hmm.
there. It also has a water pill effect. So it will cause you to
So
pee.
diuretic.
Yes, it's
Okay.
oh, look at you. You have been studying now. Come on, doc. Right? It'll cause you to urinate. And so that's also
Okay.
beneficial. And then lastly, what it will do is it will exhibit what's called nitric oxide. It will help support nitric oxide, which is the overall health of the vessel to cause it to dilate.
Okay.
So that's the beauty of the foods that we can eat there from the earth. They all have medicinal purposes. And so if we would take the time to focus on what we are eating for our health, and not so much focus on the negativity of what I can't have. Because when you
Right.
focus on what you can, if I tell you to stop and don't think of a white elephant, you're going to think of a white elephant typically. But
Hmm.
if I tell
Hmm.
you don't eat this, don't eat that, guess what you're going to do? You're going to think only about those things. So, but
Right.
instead, let's change our mindset. Let's focus on what
Okay.
we can eat for our health. Let's begin to add
Okay.
to our plate. Let's begin to move in a direction that is health promoting. Now, I want you all, everyone out there, yeah, I want you to quit eating meat and cheese and everything else. Because I can speak to you about so many aspects of the power of that for transformation with your health, the environment, and so many different things. But if you're not willing to do that, I'll meet you where you're at. And I think the goal is let's focus on what you can eat for your health because you can't have it both ways. You can't say, I don't want to take medications, and then you don't want to do the things that can help support and lower that risk additionally. So, food is
Well, that
just one of
takes
many
me. Go
things.
ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that takes me to the next question. So you're kind of really talking about food as medicine, right? But there's a lot of fear and confusion around medication. And and then like you pretty much just answered the question in terms of if I'm going to stop doing certain things, if I'm going to not take the medicine, then you've really got to be high up on the lifestyle piece, right? So like as it relates to trying to manage that lifestyle changes versus medication, like where's the line of delineation between the two?
It's all about lowering the risk. That's solely what it's
Okay.
about. And so, my feeling is until we are able to up titrate your lifestyle, we need to use medications to lower your risk. It's by any means necessary. And so
Okay.
medication, one of the means and probably the most consistent. Here's the caveat. And I've taken care of patients where I have had them have tremendous success of lowering their blood pressure without medication. I've had patients that have
Okay.
had to use both. But one of the things I can tell you that taught me a valuable lesson. I had patients who made phenomenal changes, completely
Mhm.
supportive. Everything that needed to happen happened. Dropped it, no more chest discomfort, blood pressure went rock bottom low, and eventually I started going back to seeing him once a year. I hadn't seen him in a
Okay.
while. He came back in and had tremendous life tragedies that happened.
Mm.
Son passed away, had other
Wow.
workplace issues that happened and so forth, and his weight went back up. his pressure went back up, his diabetes went back up. But guess what? He was no longer eating those foods that he started out when I was working with him because life is
Okay.
life. And so what
Okay.
that meant is that he remained at risk because he was neither on medications as well. I can check if you're taking medications because you're looking for refills. I have no idea what you're doing in the secrets of the closet of your home and how you're eating because we know that stress is dessert spelled backwards. And so the issue
Right.
is oftentimes turn to something that's acceptable. Now, that's not to say we can't accomplish the goal, but you have to inspect what you expect. You have to make sure that you are checking your numbers and making sure you are getting the return on investment either way because you do
Okay.
not want to this investment in your future self, it's so invaluable. I mean, I have to tell you this. I've taken care of a lot of patients in my life, and I have never met one patient who is on the throes of death or who's in the throes of having a major surgery or procedure who wouldn't say to me, "Doc, I'll do anything. I will do anything you say to help me overcome this." And the family says, "We'll do whatever it takes. This means more than anything." Well, I say to you, if it means anything and you would pay any price, you would do any action at that point, why wouldn't you do it before you get to that point? We have to be able to change our mindset and be able to say, you know what? My health is indeed the most important thing to me, and that there is no
Mhm.
wealth without health. You're going to leave it to someone else. And so I have to make sure I pour into myself and do whatever by any means necessary. How I feed my body, how I move my body, how I rest my body, all plays an invaluable role in the future. And I cannot, just like my bank account, you're not going to go and ignore your bank account and then you're going to go to a store and they tell you your card is declined, right? Who's going to do that? I'm not going on a date with my wife and then they decline my card. I'm checking that account, like, make sure I got money in here because this is going to be an expensive date. I want to make sure it's good, right? So I make sure that everything's in place. Why wouldn't I do that for my health? Why wouldn't I check my blood sugar? Why wouldn't I check my blood pressure to make sure what's the price of how I'm spending my time in terms of how I'm feeding my body, moving my body, resting my
Yeah.
body? That
Yeah.
becomes important.
Well, we do the blood pressure project in churches
Yeah.
and barbershops, and we do see instances where people, they're not surprised. There are some that we run into that have no idea, what their blood pressure is or is confirmed, like concerned or doesn't even know that it's out of whack. But there are plenty of people who are walking around, and they already know. And we ask them, they're like, "Oh, I already know it's not good right now, but I'm okay. I'm fine." They come in church looking good. They come into the barbershop, they leave looking good, but their numbers are, not good. And they seem like to be okay with it because they are okay. It's not like they're passing out. It's not like, they have those extreme outcomes in that moment. So, how do you convince someone to prioritize their health when everything is going well
Yeah. Well, and
on the
everything
outside?
it is absolutely on the outside. It
Mhm.
is the matrix, right? They're
Okay.
believing the narrative because they have no symptoms. There is no harm being leveraged internally. And so one of the things that's there is that I try to demonstrate in terms of whether or not it's a calculation of what their risk is. Visually, we can't ignore the impact. And that's where this gets a little bit deeper when you look in terms of imaging. There's been studies that have shown that when people are able to see the ill effects, that now they have calcification on their coronary arteries, and now their heart function is weak, and now they're more inclined to recognize the fact that there's something I need to do about this. So there's a wonderful calculation. I love science. I love what's happened inside the field. And before we would go ahead and we assess, we still do, we'll assess a person's risk. We'll say we can use different calculations and say your risk of a heart attack is 8.1%. Now, most people will look at me and like, okay, well, what does that mean? I guess that's pretty good. And we're saying, no, that's not good. That's
Ain't
bad.
out of what? Ain't out of
They're
what?
like, they're like, well, okay, I'm gonna flip that. That's 92% chance I'm good. I'm good, doc. I don't have to worry about it. But if I tell you at age
Mhm.
35 that your heart looks like someone who's age 55 based on what's called the heart age,
Mhm.
all of a sudden that has a different connotation. Because what do you mean my heart I have a heart age of 55? Why is that the case? I don't want my heart age to be 55 or 50 or 40 or anything else. I want it to be younger, if not the same age of what I am. And so
And
conveying the information in a way in which it's easily received, that's more palatable,
okay.
sometimes can drive change of understanding. Because I'll tell you, it should not ever be about fear, but it's about understanding and recognizing the patterns of what happens. And so that's where the education comes in play. Because I'll tell you, the
Mhm.
biggest driver for people, like you described, being out in the community, and whether I'm in the community or whether or not I'm inside of the office,
Okay.
I believe it's fear. I believe it's
Yes.
fear that drives people away from not wanting to know. They're like, the doc is always
Right.
telling me something bad. And so
Yeah.
what do we do? Fear is a form of stress. And what do we do when
Hmm.
we're stressed? We either are going to do what? One of two
We
things.
oh, we run or
Uh-huh.
we fight.
That's
Okay.
right. We are gonna run,
Okay.
or we're fleeing, or we fight. Or if you're a Black Panther, he flows, right? You're gonna freeze too, as well. Could be the other thing. And so those
Okay.
are the things that happen. And so what I find a lot of times is that people will revert to fear, and they will subsequently run away from knowledge. They will freeze and do not want to know what's happening inside their body. And so how can we do that? Convincing and understanding that we have to move from a state of fear and lack of resources to understand that you have plentiful resources. That if we take the time, we have resources, and it's not all or none. But we begin this process of transformation. The first step to transformation is this: is that we have to, one, make a plan. We have to put pen to paper. We have to begin the process. I'm not saying I'm gonna live healthier. What on earth does that mean? I'm gonna eat, I'm gonna exercise. What does that mean? I want you to put pen to paper and write down, okay, how am I going to exercise? When am I going to exercise? If this
And for how
happens,
long?
yeah, if this, then I'll do such and such. How long? Where?
Mhm.
And then once you write that down, same, I'm gonna eat fruits, right? Mrs. Batiste, you gonna eat fruits? Maybe not, right? So it's like, okay, you're not gonna eat fruits. What kind of fruits can you eat? Can you conceivably eat
Mhm.
or drink in a smoothie? Write those down specifically. And you want to begin the process of being intentional in your efforts. But that's not the end. You have to do what I call kill the plan. That's the most important part. You have to kill the plan once you make the plan. And what I mean by that is you want to identify every single reason why that plan will fail. You got busy at home. The kids were calling, or I didn't get a chance to go grocery shopping, or it was raining or snowing outside. I couldn't go for a walk. And now, once you identify all of the challenges, solve for them. Solve for them. Write the solution down. What am I going to do when this happens? Well, okay, guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna walk around my living room, even if it is 20 by 20. I'm gonna do some jumping jacks. I'm gonna do some sit-ups. I'm gonna do a plank. I'm going to actually do a hand grip, which has been shown to lower your blood pressure exponentially. All right. I'm going
What is a hand grip?
so a hand grip, literally, you can think of it like with a ball. So it's isometric form of exercise. You can do a plank, you can do a
Mhm.
wall sit. Those forms have been shown to be extremely beneficial and valuable for lowering the blood pressure, and something you can do in a small space. That you may say, you know
Okay.
what? You may say, now it wouldn't be anyone on this conversation, right? But you may say, I don't like fruit. So you say, okay, well, how can I get my fruit in? I'm gonna have a fruit smoothie. I'm gonna put berries and bananas, and I'll put some other stuff in there, and it'll taste a little bit better to me. And I will consume my fruit some way, somehow. You're gonna get your green leafy vegetables, and you're going to plan and strategize. How can I get this in when I'm in an area that's devoid of food access? That
Okay.
I live in the food desert, doc. I don't have access to a Whole Foods, nor do I have a Whole Foods paycheck. So you say, okay, guess what? I'm going to go to an all-encompassing superstore. You can name it. I don't want to call out names because they're not sponsoring this show. If I see the name sponsoring this show, I'll call them out. But if you see these large
Right.
places where you can get any and everything, they are large vendors. You can buy frozen vegetables. You can buy canned foods. You can go ahead and get things that can help support you and allow you to make health promoting choices. That's the value.
Okay. Okay, so you've seen patients at every stage. What's one thing you wish more people understood earlier before complications like heart failure, kidney failure, or stroke develop?
Yeah. Every little action towards your health, it matters.
Mhm.
It's
Okay.
never all or none. That guess what? When you go to sleep 15 minutes earlier, you're starting to aggregate and add on to your sleep, right? That becomes important, that you're not going to ignore your sleep apnea or the fact that you're snoring and you may be inclined to being at risk because now your airway is suffocating and you
Okay.
choose not to use a device that will help maintain your airways open, that you're not going to
Hmm.
ignore the fact that guess what? I haven't moved today. So I have to get up and move around, even if I walk around in circles or stand up when I'm on a video call. And so you begin the process of making the slow transformations. That's what I wish everyone knew is that
Okay.
you matter. Right?
Mm.
Your future self matters so much, and that we all
Okay.
can look back in time and wish that we had invested inside of whatever, you name it, Amazon or
Mhm.
Starbucks or all these things. We say, "I'd be rich." Imagine what your future self is saying about your investment in your health right now. "If I had
Right.
only done this, I wouldn't
Hmm.
be here right now." And we say that so often with so many different aspects of life, but right now is the moment in time that matters the most. Right now is the time that matters where you can make that change for your future self. And don't worry about the past. If you have diabetes, we're going to address it right now. You can begin the process of
Okay.
making transformation if you have high blood pressure. Same thing can
Hmm.
happen right now.
Okay. So for someone listening right now who hasn't had their blood pressure checked in a long time or ever, what would you say to motivate them to take that first step?
Jump in head first. Just do it. Just do it. You have to dive in and do it and get that first blood pressure checked. Recognize that it does not have to be a fearful thing. This is a knowledge thing. You're gathering information. You're gathering
Okay.
information to protect your body, and you want to understand what is the current state. Your current state
Hmm.
doesn't mean that that has to be your future state. That's your current state.
Okay.
You want to
Okay.
establish your baseline. What is your baseline? So you know when you have your transformation, because you are going to visualize it, right? You're going to see
Okay.
yourself being healthy. You need to tell yourself, I am healthy. I am worth it. I am valuable.
Hmm.
This means something. And as you begin the process of recognizing it, then transformation happens.
And so when they, okay, so they get the number, right? This is the first time, let's say they're, because we see a lot of young people in their 20s
Mhm.
as a result of one of the sites that we're in that gets a lot of students. And, their numbers are elevated in their 20s. What would you say to someone whose numbers are elevated in their 20s?
The same thing I'm saying when someone in their 50s and 60s and 70s is the next level is let's confirm it. If you're out in the community, right, a one-time reading, depending upon what the number is, if it's 180 over 90 or if it's 130 over 75, I'm having that number repeated. I want to make sure that we're number one, we're checking our blood pressure correctly. I want to make sure that
Okay.
we take the time to sit and to relax for a few moments. I want to make sure that you haven't had any stimulants. So if you're a young person, I want to make sure you haven't had any of these little drinks that keep you up all night and help you keep that you use to keep going. I want to make sure that you have adequate sleep. I want to make sure you're not having caffeine or that you haven't just been running around. Once you do that, have you been sitting calmly for about 5 minutes or so? Next thing I want to
Okay.
find out is, were you talking? A nervous kind of talk? Were you moving around? Were your feet solid on the ground? Was your arm at heart level? Did we use the right size blood pressure cuff with you? Was the blood
Mhm.
pressure cuff that matched your arm? Now that's a problem I have all the time because they give me a small cuff because of my
Right. It's too
bicep.
small.
I
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
make sure that I get the
It's
right
like the
size
Incredible
cuff.
Hulk. It's like you're busting
I
out
mean,
of, yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
I mean, yeah, it
Yeah.
happens sometimes. So I
Right.
mean,
Right.
so the major thing is you want to make sure those aspects are correct. Once you
Okay.
check it and you relax, then you want to repeat it after a minute or so and see what the
Okay.
numbers are. We're looking for a pattern. We're not
Right.
looking specifically for a one-time number. So now your next stage is go in and inspect again. See, match it. You want to make sure the blood pressure cuff is accurate, and you want to make sure your reading is accurate. And once you establish that you have it, now you're working with your healthcare provider and you're deciding, can I try? Can I make a plan? Can you help me make a plan that may be able to help me drive my blood pressure down? What can we do together? Now, once you establish that plan, then you see it out over the next 1 to 2, 3 months. And then if it's successful, great. Now you're checking it periodically. If it's not successful, now you're having a different conversation about what do you need to lower that risk.
Okay, so what's the one thing, and I know that you've kind of, to summarize everything, what would you say to motivate someone who's listening right now, whose blood pressure may not be what it needs to be, or that has a family history of, high blood pressure. My mother had it, my dad had it, my uncles had it, all of these things. What would you do to motivate them and provide them with the level of hope that they need in order to change those outcomes, with high blood pressure being the most preventable disease?
Yeah, that's hard. It's an individual thing as opposed
So it's
to
recognizing what their why is.
correct. So thank
Okay.
you. Yes, it is because on an
Mhm.
individual basis that becomes important. If I'm speaking generically to
Mhm.
individuals, if it's a man, I'll be honest. I'm talking to them about erectile function, the
Okay.
major inhibitor in the fact that plays a role. If I'm talking about women, I'm talking about the risk of dementia. I'm talking about the risk of heart attack, of stroke, of issues that can happen overall, and not from a standpoint of fear, but about making sure you're doing what you need to do in order to have the best outcome possible. So there are multiple strategies, but ultimately it is about a person's why, that they are why it's important to them to have the conversation overall. And sometimes they don't know their why. Sometimes
Mhm.
people are uncertain about what their why is, specifically, and we have to tease out to try and see if we can get to the bottom of everything.
Okay. Okay. Well, I am very grateful for your time today, and the work that you're doing in the community to really prevent these negative outcomes and turning them into positive outcomes. I mean, if there's one thing that we have, learned from the work that we're doing around blood pressure, is that it is the most preventable. Like 80%, right, of people can change their blood pressure outcomes to being positive, to being normal, to being consistently in the normal range, therefore giving their organs the blood flow and the support that they need to do the work that they were created to do in the first place, right?
Mhm.
And so, is there anything additional that you would like to add before we close out tonight?
Well, I mean, not to self promote, but I think everyone needs to get selfish in their approach.
Okay.
And I want to leave you with that one key. If you get selfish, what I mean by that, I wrote in my book, is that spiritual from a standpoint of mindfulness, of allowing the mind to rest, taking deep breaths, as you mentioned, because it will lower the blood pressure, it will decrease your stress, that you exercise, not just what you think in terms of physically, but mentally. Exercise belief that you can overcome this, that you're worth it, that you engage in love, which means forgiveness and gratitude and altruism. Studies have shown that people who volunteer, especially those who volunteer for Healthy Heart Nation, have lower blood pressures and longer length of life. And we know that when
Yes.
you forgive, you're mitigating the stress effects that are there. That when you engage in gratitude, lower bouts of blood pressure. That when you eat the foods I mentioned, foods of the earth, the fruits and vegetables and whole grains, that when you have connection with people, relationships, individuals trusting that you can lower the walls and be vulnerable with, that's powerful. That when you
Yeah.
can engage in sleep and rest, that when you get deep sleep, which is a reflection of your safety, right? That when you get that deep sleep, all of a sudden your body switches over into what's called parasympathetic mode, the tend and befriend, and your blood pressure will dip as it's supposed to. When that blood pressure doesn't, we know it remains high and leaves you at risk. That when you engage in laughter and which then extends into joy and smiling, that when you smile, studies have shown you can lower your blood pressure. That these are simple tools that you can take that can mitigate all the other stressors that are around us, because we understand that the noise factor in communities at risk raises blood pressure. We understand that the pollution raises the blood pressure. We know that the absence of green space raises the blood pressure. We understand that the financial stress can raise the blood pressure. We know that listening to anything on the news is going to raise your blood pressure. So you have to build your resiliency. I want to tell you
Okay.
that building your resiliency requires you to be selfish. And that is the
Right.
way that you build your resiliency, not just so your blood pressure is low, but so you can live a life of purpose. That's solely what it's about, is living a life of purpose, not just to fit into a new pair of pants, not just to get rid of your medications, but to live a life
Mhm.
of purpose. That's what I want to leave you with, that hope and encouragement that with hope, there is hope. We can overcome
Yes.
this together, and we can transform
Yes.
and eliminate health disparities across
Mhm.
racial groups, financial groups, and educational disparate groups as well.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So, as we close today's episode, remember this: your blood pressure is not just a number, it's a reflection of your future. You have the power to change your story. You have the power to prevent what so many families, including mine, have had to endure. So, don't wait. Get your numbers checked. Make one intentional change. Share what you've learned today with someone you love, because saving lives shouldn't start in a hospital. It starts with awareness. What action and with conversations like this? So we have this question here from Kenya Walker, and she says, "Why do you have to uncross your legs before getting your blood pressure checked?"
It's a great question. I actually just got hit with this question about a couple of weeks ago, so I'm prepared. So I have to
All
thank
right, go
Cameron.
for it.
I have to thank Cameron Hardy because he somehow knew this question was going to come up in my future. I had to research it
Okay.
out a little bit. And so what I learned at that point is the fact that there's several factors, but crossing the legs can artificially raise your blood pressure by several
Okay.
millimeters. So each of the
Okay.
things we talk about, whether or not it's talking, whether or not it's your arm at the appropriate angle, excuse me, the alignment with your heart, all plays a significant role in terms of the blood pressure. And these little small millimeters matter. That could be the difference of the risk group that we categorize you in a decision for use of medications or success. So pay attention to all of that.
Okay, so does that mean that we shouldn't sit with our legs crossed like throughout the day? Does it, or
No, I mean, transiently, no. I mean, I've never seen studies that have shown consistently that there is an adverse outcome of people who cross their legs versus those who don't. We
okay.
also know if we're going into esoteric stuff, we know that if you hold your urine. So if
Mhm.
you're on a podcast interview and you have to urinate in about an hour, that could be problematic for your blood pressure. But no, I'm joking. But
Okay.
I've
But
seen the
does it just affect it in that moment, or it affects it over time as well?
No, it affects it in that moment, right? So everything
Okay.
in life is about the repeated exposure over time,
Okay.
right? So the
Okay.
repeated exposure. So the longer you're exposed to
Mm-hmm.
persistently elevated blood pressure, to persistently elevated cholesterol, the more likelihood damage is going to occur. But if I have one instance of it or two, that typically is not going to cause a major issue unless it's extremely high and elevated.
Okay. Do you see any other questions? I'm sorry, I'm not looking at them.
No
Do we
worries.
have any
No,
other?
I do not. I do
The
not.
only
That
one?
is the main one that I saw.
All right. Well, that's a good one to get. So I'm glad you got that one. So
Yes.
thank you all for joining us on this Healthy Heart Nation Heart to Heart podcast. We ask that you subscribe, follow, like, and share. And we ask you also to stay committed, stay encouraged, and most importantly, stay healthy. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night.